Hi, thanks so much for joining us with APC Chats, where we basically work to spotlight people, voices, and opinions that deserve a platform and may not often get it. That said, feel free to join us in the conversation, following us at APC Collective on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I am Audrey Ponzio with APC Collective, joined by Ingrid Quiros of
Hello,
APC
everyone.
Collective. And Ricky Caden with Sprint.
Hello.
And so today we're going to talk about all things social storytelling and kind of the evolution of marketing to the digital space. Ricky is responsible for Sprint's digital footprint to some degree, and I'll let Ricky explain what you do.
Yeah, so I joined Sprint about 7 months ago, and primarily helping within the corp comms and social media, so making sure that all of our corp comms content is kind of optimized for the social sphere and things like that. And then also assisting our executives with social and kind of guiding them in the best ways to do that to not only elevate their brand, but also make sure that the Sprint brand is represented well.
So that's kind of, I mean, if it just in context to someone who doesn't necessarily understand the realm of social, like it seems like a daunting task. You're basically creating the conversation that lives in the social sphere for a brand and its leadership. How do you do that in a way that feels authentic?
No, it is a big challenge of kind of doing that in a good way. And part of that is just trying to think of who the audience is and the audience that we're trying to reach. And for that particular piece of content, who is the audience? Because within corp comms that changes, right? So if we have like an earnings release, that's different content, a different audience than something like our corporate social responsibility type content. And then even as we have product announcements, plan changes, and promotions and things like that, that's an additional different audience. And so the first question is like, who is the best person that can get the most value out of this information, and what's the best way to present it to them? So for instance, like the earnings, like this is all analysts, they want the actual like hard facts, like they don't want fluff, like an editorial version of the numbers. They want the numbers. And so even though to a consumer, like that's really boring, for the analysts, that's exactly what they want. And so you feed it to them in the exact way that they want it, versus a consumer wants a little bit more of the storytelling aspect of, why is this important to me and things like that. Whereas, that's where the audience really makes the difference, I think.
Awesome. And how have you found, I guess, building from a leadership position, like how is it scripting to some extent the footprint for leaders or executives? Is it different than for the brand itself?
A little bit. Part of it is kind of getting to know them and the way that they want to position things and be positioned and such. And so, getting to know kind of their position helps, put that together in a way that makes sense, that represents them. It's the same. It's funny. I have friends that are like, so how do you do that? And it's like, well, it's no different than, the president has a speechwriter. Very rarely do presidents or major leaders write their own content. And so in that sphere, it's commonplace and nobody thinks twice about it. And so within the social sphere, it's very similar. You don't think twice about the fact that somebody else wrote this and they just kind of skimmed over it and made sure that it matched
their point of view and perspective.
Yeah.
Does that carry a different responsibility doing it for an individual versus, I mean, is it heavier kind of to get it right, or does it feel the same? Like
I don't think so. I think it's the same. I think, because even when you write for brands, and so from a brand perspective, I managed Radio Shack social presence for a number of years. I had my own site that had its own social presence, and then I did social for Tripcase, which is a mobile travel app. And so each one of those brands has a persona that you want to match your content to, and all three of those were significantly different. And so you just kind of pick up that persona of what that brand wants to sound like and be like. And so for it to be a brand versus an individual at the core level doesn't change a whole lot.
So as marketers and storytellers, and Ingrid, you and I kind of joke about this because I'm actually a very private person. I don't like necessarily being in the spotlight. And I think it's just the time that I grew up in or the career that I've had. That was where you just stay. And now with the advent of social media, it's kind of forced me to kind of get out of my shell and be a little bit more vocal, and to the point of it could be detrimental to the team or to the business we're trying to build if we're not completely front and center. my excuse has long been, well, I script social for other companies, or I'm involved in marketing other products and brands. And so like, you know, people pay me for my ideas. Why am I just giving them away for free? Do you feel like doing this for a living hinders your footprint or your want or willingness to share?
Somewhat. It makes me less likely to participate in social outside of work.
Yeah.
And I've always been a pretty social guy. So like all my accounts are public. Like I don't use privacy settings very much at all. Because once it's on the internet, like it's on the internet, regardless
matter
of what,
yeah.
you know, you can feel like you're maybe a little bit more protected,
Yeah.
but you're really not. So to that regard, like I've always kind of had that, that mindset. And so, like I said, it's less likely that I want to do it. I've found the longer I do it, the more appreciation I have of disconnecting completely. And in fact, I ran across it again today. There's a photo from it was some parade or something of like all the people like up against the barricade with all their phones out, and there's one little old lady with her like arm draped over the thing, just watching and just like taking that moment in
and being present.
Yeah, and like being present. Everybody else has their phone up, and she's
Yeah.
just like, whatever, I'm just gonna experience this and have my own experience. And so the longer that I do social, the more appreciation I have for that. But there's still some things, like I'll post a lot more while I'm at South by
Yeah.
than I normally would, because there's more stuff happening.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of the audience. So most people really don't care what a guy who runs social media at Sprint does in his spare time. But when I'm at
We
an
do,
event
Ricky.
like this,
Yeah,
I'm
we
sure
do.
y'all do. But when I'm at an event like this, there's interesting people that I'm meeting and talking
Yeah.
with. And so I think that there's situations where you kind of use social more personally than normally.
So for like posterity, just to kind of document, like this is happening, or I heard this and it's worthy of noting or
Yeah.
sharing. So you're at South by,
Yes, I am.
and Austin gets really busy and really exciting during this period. And I feel like we talked about it a little bit ago in previous sessions of like, there's an energy to this place. And I think it's wonderful. I feel like for locals, people have different takes depending on where you live, depending on how long you've been here. There is, in my mind, it's like the more people that can come and see what the city's about and appreciate it for all its funkiness and weirdness, the better. What do you come for? Like, what is it that brings you here?
Yeah, so this is my 7th South by. I skipped 1 year, so it's 7 and 8 years. And it's even been interesting to watch South by change over the years. It used to be all contained within the convention center.
Yeah.
And like you didn't go a block away from the convention center because there was nothing. And now it's spread out across
It's everywhere.
the whole city. Even like this year, there's been 2 or 3 events already that have been across 35, which has always been like, oh no, we don't go over there.
Yeah.
And so even seeing how much it's taking over the whole city. And what I come for, one, I come because I live in Fort Worth. So it's, you know, a couple hours drive, and it's kind of a no-brainer to be down here where there's so much happening. But for me, it's really the conversations that you get to have with people who are think very similar to you, but also have different perspective. I was talking to my wife, who's a nurse, so she doesn't do social at all. And likewise, I know nothing about nursing. But it's different to have conversations with people who do similar work to you. And most people, especially within social, if they're on the brand side, they're the only person in their entire organization who does social.
Yeah.
And so it can be very lonely.
Yeah.
And when you try to have conversations with people, you first have to explain why this is important before you can then get into like discussing the aspects of that, whatever it is. And so you come to South by, and I can meet other people who manage social at different brands that may be in the same niche, maybe in the same industry or not. But we can all speak that kind of common language. And so I can say, you know, I'm really having an issue with this. And I don't have to explain what this is. They already know. And then we can have an actual conversation that's useful. And so South by, of course, you could do that any time of the year, right? Like you can do that on Skype or whatever. But being in person, you get a different feel for it. And then the other part is just the serendipity of, you know, you show up at a party and you have no idea who's there, but you just walk up and introduce yourself to somebody and, you know, what do you do? And everybody wants to talk about what they do, especially at South by.
Yeah.
And so like last night, I met a guy who organizes events for founders. So people who have founded companies, and he's building communities for them where they can get access to other founders that they may not normally be in contact with to talk about things that founders deal with. And so it's a very specific thing. But if I just founded a company and I'm getting to a point where I'm kind of lost in that, it's cool to know that there's a community where you can access. And so, and like I would normally never have interacted with him, like
any other
yeah, like our
situation.
paths just wouldn't have crossed.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Now I can go look it up. And so that kind of cross pollination is not possible anywhere else that I've ever seen.
I agree 100%. And I feel like you see some of the bigger thinkers come here on a yearly basis. And it was a few years ago, and my sister kind of has always been, I guess always, but recently since the advent of digital, been more digitally minded. So she's the one who brought me to an off the track South by event. And we went to go listen to Gary Vaynerchuk speak. And it's like, and he was a big deal then, but to see how big he's become and just kind of get inspired. We've seen him a few times, but it's just been really interesting to have access with or without a badge, just the kind of conversations that you can stumble upon in Austin for a particular period of time is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, and even people, and I don't know how the best way to say this, but somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk in normal events, right? They're going to the green room before they speak, and like they're kind of on this like sectioned off area of like the conference or whatever. But at South by, like you see these people walking down the street, or you go to a party and like they're just there.
There's Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, like there's very little. There's some of it, but there's very little like tiers to South by. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's you're just kind of all here, and so that's part of that serendipity is you never know who you're going to sit next to and strike up a conversation, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, I had no idea who you were. Or it could be maybe you talked to somebody 2 years ago and then they reach out and they're like, oh, we met at South by and since then here's what I've done. And you're like, holy cow, what have I been doing?
Yeah, where have I been these past 2 years? So knowing that your role is all things strategy for social and social storytelling for the brand and then also for leadership, what is it that you love most about the day-to-day?
It's always different. It's always changing. There's always something new. Even though it can get a little bit repetitive, there's always, a new challenge that pops up. Every day is an adventure. And part of the other reason that I really enjoy Sprint is the culture is really cool. For such an old company, I work remote, my boss works remote. So there's kind of an acceptance of some of that new type thing that a lot of times in a corporation that old, you just wouldn't have. Mm-hmm. And even when you're in the office, like there's no suits, and things like that. Casual. Like it's a very casual environment. And so that's something that I know our CEO has taken great pains to kind of instill. And it's really cool. And it has a noticeable change on the way that people work. Because I've been in environments that's much more buttoned up and you work more kind of buttoned up and more closed off and more kind of professional. Yeah. Whereas when you're in that more casual, you're more likely to
open.
Yeah, you're more open. You're more likely to hear other ideas and take those into account. So it's really kind of the day-to-day is fun.
So with Marcelo Clare, who joined Sprint, it's going to be 3 years in August, right?
I think so.
You've been there 7 months. Do people talk about pre and post Marcelo?
Not that I've heard.
Okay.
I'm not in the office,
so that's true.
It doesn't come up over I am.
Yeah.
But no, like I said, it's a good energy that I think everybody there really enjoys. Kind of
his vision.
Yeah, his vision and has bought into it, and it makes sense. And you hear him speak, and you're like, I'm excited to be a part of that, which is cool.
Yeah, as a self-made man and someone who's obviously seen much success, but to take over a company and really want to take it to the next level and be invested, that he doesn't necessarily have to work at this point, but to be invested in taking it to another level, I think is pretty awesome. Yeah. And it's been awesome to see as a bystander of just like the evolution of the story, of Sprint's story and how Sprint goes about engaging. So to be a part of it is a really cool thing. From a brand perspective, because there's brands that you've worked on and there's brands that you don't work on, who do you think is getting social right now?
It kind of depends on what their objective is. So a good example, one that doesn't normally meet, is Denny's. Does really well, and not in like a traditional, I can measure this and this actually results in people eating pancakes at the Denny's. Yeah. I would be hard pressed to listen to anybody tell me that they're actually making that tie, but it positions the brand in kind of a fun way. Yeah. And they don't take themselves too seriously, but they're also not. I don't know. I like what they do.
Luis Martinez used to run Sprint Social Latino, and then he went to Denny's.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so it's a former
Well, there
Sprint
you go.
guy.
There you go. I did not know that, for the record.
Yeah.
I did not. So I like brands that kind of have a lot of fun within social. And then some of the ones that just do really well. I had an awesome experience with Bose recently. I had some of their little earbuds, which really I have weird ears. And so like earbuds don't normally stay in my ears. So you need to have that like thing that attaches. I don't know what it's called, but if you look at Bose,
ear clip.
If you look at Bose headbuds, you're like, oh, okay, that thing. And they were like maybe a week or two out of warranty, and I kind of pinged them on Twitter just out of curiosity to say, hey, do you guys have like replacements or something? Because like the cable had frayed and whatever. And in less than an hour, strictly on Twitter, they didn't kick me off onto another platform or say call this number or anything like that. Strictly within Twitter, they said, oh, sure, we'd love to replace those for you, and had like a replacement sent out. I already had like the shipping number and everything. Like it was nuts. And I was like, that's awesome. And these are expensive, earbuds. But I'm more likely, one, I like them, so I'm more likely to buy them anyways. But two, it's like, holy cow, like that's awesome. I get really frustrated when I reach out to a company and they punt me off somewhere else. I'm like, no. I asked for help here.
Yeah.
Like
Talk to me here.
If I went to the store and you said, here, use this phone to call our number, like that would be ridiculous, right? Nobody would do that. But for some reason, companies find that acceptable on social, and that drives me absolutely nuts. Like, I just know. Another one that does awesome is American Airlines. And the reason that I love them is because somehow, I don't know what they have, but they have a file on me. And so if I tweet them and I say, hey, why did my pre-check not show up on my ticket? That's all I have to say. They know who I am. They've already, because of previous interactions, they already know my frequent flyer number. They can look up my Advantage account, see what flight I'm getting on, and like they know all that, and they can say, oh, it looks like it's okay for us. And like I didn't have to do anything. And now at some point I did, right? Like I had to tweet, DM them that. But once I did it once, they saved it somewhere. And some people would find that creepy, like they're building a file on me. I don't. But to me, it's insanely helpful because I don't have to dig around and find it, because I can't, for the love of anything, remember my frequent flyer number. Like I don't know why, but it can't stick. Mine. And so it's super helpful to know that if I tweet them, they've got it covered, and I don't have to dig around for documents or anything like that. So
I wonder if there's a way to connect with them as a business to business conversation and say like, hey, what's the platform or the back end you use to identify your customers by numbers? Because that could be super beneficial to a company like Sprint, especially for like customer care. So you don't necessarily have to have a phone call or another offline exchange to get their information and get the problem solved. I feel like the vulnerability of customer service or customer care socially from Airbnb, I think Hannibal Buress, the comedian, someone I follow on social. I'm kind of like a creeper. I don't like to write a lot, but I like to follow people. He wrote that he had his TV stolen. And he said, Airbnb, what up? Like, why did I get my TV stolen? And then he got a lot of flack because he's a comedian. So a lot of people came at him with like, Hannibal, really? Like your Airbnb in your place? Like, aren't you good? Like, do you really need any more money?
Yeah.
But they responded immediately and it was like, we'll fix it. And I think it's like, wow, just the customer service aspect of social. Like you talk about maintaining a conversation, but the engagement opportunity, not just for surprise and delight, but you got to fix things fast.
Yeah.
And when I was coming up, this is, I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe at Edelman, we were told like, get it off the main page, like take the interaction somewhere where you can have a live conversation and just fix it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of an older school way. I'm sure they don't do that now, but
it depends on the industry.
Yeah.
If it's something that's like a warranty thing, like you can do that in Twitter.
Yeah.
But if it's something like accessing accounts and stuff, then that's, scenarios where certainly you have to take it to a more secure.
Yeah.
Another brand that came into my head while I was sitting here is Shiner.
Shinerbach.
Yeah. They have ridiculous content. And like I love, and I normally don't follow very many brands at all on Facebook. Like I just don't want that in my feed. I love getting Shiner stuff in my feed. It's always like well crafted. It matches.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. It matches their brand perfectly. Mm-hmm. Like the way the graphics are created and all that kind of stuff. And it's content that matches me as a Shiner fan. Like they've done a really good job of who is our audience, what type of things would they find humorous, would they find interesting, and it's just really well done. So that's another one that, like, if you're looking for ideas on like how to match, what should my content look like, don't mimic theirs, but
find your voice.
Yeah, but as an example of a brand that just knows their audience ridiculously well and then is able to execute on that, Shiner really stands out.
So how do you negotiate this? I mean, Sprint in itself is going through kind of a brand transformation by simple leadership shifts, right? It's an older, respected company that's evolving with the times and meaning more for its customers every day. How do you take the evolution of that story and mean more to more how do you, like, from a consumer perspective, you serve everybody, all walks of life, all ages, all ethnicities. How do you have a brand voice when you're trying to appeal to the masses versus a Shiner? Like, Shiner's a guy, like Getty Cooler guy, probably Texan or at least Southwest. Like, that's a very distinct voice, and it's pretty easy to program for football or conversations around, outdoor type activities. How do you do that for a massive company?
So I don't work on the Sprint brand stuff, but that was a similar challenge that we had at Radio Shack, which I managed their social for a number of years. And it's the same thing. It's like, I don't care who you are. I want you buying stuff in my store at the end of the day, right? Whatever color you are, whatever your preferences on anything are, I don't care. Buy batteries.
Yeah.
However, what we tried to do, at least, was identify who is the most likely person to. So regardless of the fact that we want everybody in the store, it's a balance between creating content specifically for the people who are most likely to engage with that content, while not alienating anybody or somebody who's not likely. We had a similar challenge at Tripcase, was primarily focused on business travelers. And that was kind of the main target, but also leisure travelers use it all the time, which is great. Again, if you're traveling, you should use it. It's awesome. I still use it. But that was a discussion we had a lot, was A, is this interesting to a business traveler? And then B, is it alienating to a non-business traveler? And even within that, from a business traveler standpoint, we had to be very careful of, and we got called out a couple of times on pieces of content that were, because a lot of times if you think of a business traveler, you're probably thinking of a dude in a suit. But that's not all business travelers, right? They're women in suits or any other, dress type.
I wear Vans when I travel.
Yeah, I mean, sweatpants, like you can't really kind of focus it there. And even with that, across ethnicities, we had huge business. I mean, Tripcase was huge in Asia and South America and stuff. So you had all kinds of, it was really tricky to make sure that we were speaking to a business traveler without letting any of our and we had a pretty diverse team, but without letting any one of our kind of unacknowledged bias come into that. And so, and it's tricky because, like I said, I got called out a few times. I mean, I'm a white dude that lives in, the U.S. and so a lot of I didn't even recognize it, and somebody would come in and say, well, that looks really bad, and like it hadn't even registered. Yeah. And which is another reason it's really important when you're balancing that to have multiple voices chiming in on that content, because if you have one person creating content and nobody else sees it, it's going to mirror whatever that one person experience, whether they acknowledge it purposefully or it's just accidental, and so you have to have voices from different areas, different cultures, different everything, saying, hey, that looks really bad from my perspective. And then you can say, okay, so how do we do that so that it's not offensive to one person inadvertently? And especially in today's culture, I mean, your default mode is offended. And so you have to work really hard, for most consumers, like that's it. And especially on the internet, right? The internet's always offended at everything. So you have to find a way to purposefully be not offensive and not leave that opening of, and so,
It's hard. It's hard because I feel like you would think a lot of people dismiss it and like, oh, it's just social and it's kind of fun and you get to do something fun every day. And it's like, actually, it's a mini little campaign. You're like literally creating a campaign every single day. And it's a lot of hard work. I know I kind of talked to the team about timing. I'm like, how long is this going to take? But it is hard work. I totally acknowledge that fact because you are creating original content every single day.
And it's like PR and social for us, because as we tap into both for a variety of our clients, we're also mindful we have to extend this conversation to everyone and not just keep it solely to who we think our target audience is who we think is receiving that message. So a lot of PR tactics that we usually use whenever we're thinking of media relation opportunities, we kind of implement that on our social content as well, to make sure we filter any possible offensive word or offensive subject and make sure that that's super clear, so we stay out of those conversations.
Or like program for the absolute worst headlines so that you can avoid them. I think one time we found, to no fault of anyone's, I think it was just an oversight on another team's visuals, and there was a Confederate flag in the background. I'm like, no, we're not going to put that up. Yeah. But no one saw it, and no one saw it because you're just, if you're moving fast and you're not clicking on the image and kind of up it, like making it higher in resolution or just seeing the bigger format, it's so yeah, it does take multiple eyes with multiple sensitivities, and people are programmed to think differently depending on their context. So
right,
as daunting as it may seem for the people in charge, I totally get why there's a small army kind of looking at every post.
Yeah, because there will be once you post it.
Yeah.
So that can either
an
be
angry mob.
That can either be your army or that angry mob out there.
Yeah.
And I would much rather it be my army than any angry mob out there just looking for some reason to be offended.
So you guys at Sprint have, multiple retailers, multiple partners, and they all kind of post from around the country, and you guys chime in and engage. How do you set filters or parameters for employees at that level to kind of sift through and just like, here's what we do post, here's what we don't post? What are the mechanisms in play to make sure that people are on tone?
So field employees are challenging because there's a lot of HR stuff that you have to keep in mind, and asking them to engage on social during work hours and all that sort of thing. And so in my experience, I managed a lot of that at Radio Shack actually also. And whenever I'd talk to our store ops team, it was like, look, like you have these people in the field and they talk to customers all day in person. And if you're comfortable with them talking to a person in real life, then you should be comfortable with them posting things on social. Now you have to have the same conversations, and you have to make it abundantly clear that the same rules apply, because the internet can often feel anonymous, even though it's not.
Yeah.
And so you still have to do some training and some education on, look, like this is still you, whether your handle is, first name, last name, or your handle is, Monkey Boy 978. You're still you.
Watch out, Monkey Boy.
And so and as a company, I mean, not necessarily every company is tracking all that stuff, but I mean, I've certainly been a part of, investigations of this employee posted a picture of them.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it.
With a joint.
Yeah.
And so in a state that's not legal.
Yeah. And that wasn't medicinal.
Right. That wasn't, very obviously wasn't medicinal. And they're wearing their work shirt.
Yeah.
And the employee thinks they're crafty because they didn't include their face, but there's so many other clues, or the account has all these other posts that you can. And so, so companies that want to maintain and control, like it's still there. I mean, we kind of talked about that earlier and joked about it. It's like, once it's on the internet, it's there. And so, but as a company, and especially when you're empowering your employees, which you absolutely 100% should empower your employees, especially retail sales, like that's a no-brainer. They're literally your company. If they don't come to work, your company doesn't exist. And so, or very long at least. And so it's similar conversations that you would have to them about appropriate conversations when they're standing at work. Yeah. And, if you have a customer standing in front of you, you behave in a certain way. That's the way that you should behave on the internet. Whether you're at work or not, you're still representing your work. And so, and really and truly, you should also think that when you're not on the clock in real life, if you're no, they obviously all don't. And companies can't dictate what you can and can't do outside of work. But hopefully you're, and it's a pride thing, right? Like you should be proud to work where you work. And so you should be proud to tell people, it shouldn't be like, oh crap, I have to go to work. Where do you work? Oh, I don't want to tell you. Yeah. Right. Like that's not the kind of employee, especially a salesperson, that you would want, like
probably not
if
the
your
best
salesperson doesn't start everything with a pitch, then,
Yeah.
So, but it's tricky, and it's very daunting for store ops people, and HR especially. But it's all about education and just like, hey, this is, the way that we want you to do this. To especially, retail sales, like, look, you can use social to get lots of sales, and you should. That's highly encouraged. But if you're going to do that, then you also have to keep in mind all this other stuff too. It's not do's and don'ts. It's just all of this together type thing.
How much do you do influencer engagement?
Not a lot. I've done some in the past, and I've been on the receiving end as an influencer when I was a tech blogger, but I haven't done a whole lot in the corporate side.
I wonder because of who leadership is and their role and responsibility, they are in some terms an influencer. Does that come with a certain amount of responsibility to either showcase certain topics that they may not necessarily be traditional champions of, or have a different balance of content that wouldn't necessarily be natural as an influencer or a leader?
Yeah, I mean, it falls, again, it's very similar to being a brand. I mean, there's some stuff that you have to post because you have to post it, and your audience may not engage, but it's part of business that you have to put this on there. And so I think for now, certainly you have filters of, is this true, is this accurate, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But whether it's for the brand or an influencer representing the brand, some of that stuff is just it's part of the deal. And so I don't think it's significantly different.
Who do you follow socially?
I use Twitter like a big chat room. So if you're unlikely to respond to me, I probably will not follow you.
Really? So like if you follow me and I don't say thanks, you'll unfollow me?
Well, even not, like if I tweeted at you about something and you didn't respond. So like I don't follow a lot of celebrities because even though they post some really great stuff, if I tweet and say, oh, that's, awesome or whatever, and the likelihood that they're going to respond is slim to none, I don't need that in my feed.
Yeah.
So I don't follow like news sites or anything like that. Like I have RSS for that. Most of my Twitter is people that I've known online for a number of years that, like I said, I use it like a ginormous chat room, which is not the normal use case scenario. But it's what makes it valuable for me.
Do you say gentleman's chat room?
No.
Okay.
General, ginormous, ginormous chat room. No.
I think you said a gentleman's chat room. I'm like, what?
No.
It's a different podcast, Ricky.
It's family friendly.
Okay.
It's family friendly.
Okay, good.
But it's my online community.
Yeah.
And so if you're not going to participate in the community, then I don't want you in it. For me.
No, and it makes sense. There's a lot of digital people. My sister's one of them. She has her digital friends, and they're like it is like an ongoing chat room with its advice and services and recommendations, and it's a whole digital existence. And I'm like,
yeah, it's part of it.
Yeah.
And then I don't do a lot of Facebook. Most of my Facebook is posting from other stuff. But I use Twitter the most, and then I do some Instagram, but not. If I had to only keep one social,
Twitter,
it'd be Twitter, hands down. I would quickly give up all the rest and not look back.
What do you think is going to happen with Twitter?
As the type of user that I am, I hope that it does nothing and that it doesn't get more exciting, because every time they announce something that's supposedly intended to get more people on Twitter, it winds up being bad an experience for people like me, because I'm not who they want to be on there. So I kind of have like weird wishes for Twitter.
Don't grow.
Yeah, like I hope that it
be
stays
only
small.
so profitable.
And I like that there's not everybody on there, and stuff like that. So like celebrity Twitter, I can't imagine getting involved in that and like being interested. Like it just has zero effect on me. So I hope that they listen to their actual users, though. A lot of the features that they've rolled out over the past couple of years have been interesting features, but as a longtime user, so I started using Twitter in February of 2007.
Wow.
And so there's so many other things that I'm like, the amount of time that you spent building this feature could have much more wisely been spent doing this feature. And of course, every user has their own individual list for that, right? But and they're starting to get better. So they're starting to do stuff that actually fights or tries to inhibit trolling and harassment and things like that, which is 100% what they should be doing.
Yeah.
But a lot of the the things that try to get people to focus more on it being like a news channel.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have zero interest in that. And so I'd prefer them focus on things that help me, engage with my community. But
What's funny is because I read it for the news.
yeah, and I realize
Yeah.
I've had coworkers on the same social team
Yeah.
that use it completely differently. And they're
That
like, oh,
it's-
no, I would never want anybody
It's
to
my
respond
morning.
like they
It's
want
my
it.
morning and evening paper.
Yeah, so I use RSS like that.
Yeah.
But I'm a little bit old school.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what RSS anymore.
I do.
Good.
I still just use Twitter though.
It's my favorite. If you asked me to give up either RSS or Twitter, I don't know what I would do. I would probably be undecisive for the rest of my life trying to figure it out.
Where do you go for news? From like, who do you have feed into your RSS feed?
It's mostly tech
Okay.
because it's kind of my background. The Verge is one of my favorite sites.
Very good.
I know most of the writers
Mhm.
from working in tech for so
Mhm.
long. In fact, I'm probably going to meet up with them, several of them, after this evening. So The Verge is a big one. A lot of... I read Mashable,
Yeah.
but I kind of hate myself for reading it. So it's kind of like, it helps me stay in the loop.
Yeah.
I'm not really good at keeping up with, I'm not a big sports guy,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not a big, again, celebrity type stuff. So Oscars and
You don't know what's
all that
happening with
stuff.
Nicki Minaj right now.
I have no clue.
No
Okay.
Twitter party.
And I don't do Twitter parties and stuff
Okay.
like that. So
Yeah.
Mashable does kind of help me
Stay current.
at least not feel like an idiot at the water cooler.
Okay.
When somebody makes like a joke on a conference call, I
Yeah.
can at least like laugh along and not fake it.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the two big ones. And then the most of it is just various tech blogs within mobile, but also just general tech type stuff.
So you're providing the client perspective. What are you looking for in your partners, your vendors, and your agencies?
It's a great question. So I've had the luxury of working with some really awesome agencies over my career. And the ones that I call back when I move jobs and say, oh my gosh, you have to come help me at this new job, are the ones that make me smarter and that I don't have to, it's the intangibles is the hardest part and the most important part. I've had one agency that I could not get to respond to an email for the life. And I would send them, a request and say, I need this by next Friday. And I would get nothing. And then come Thursday, I'd be like, hey, am I going to get this tomorrow? And just nothing. And then either they would deliver it on time, but I still was stressed about it.
Yeah.
Versus a single email that, hey, we've got this. We'll have it in time.
Yeah.
It's
Easy.
just the confirmation. It takes
Easy.
10 seconds. And that's the kind of intangible thing
Yeah.
that costs no money and makes the difference between an agency that I will call back and an agency that when I leave a job, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm glad I don't have to work with them anymore.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I've had very few of those, one or two in my whole career. But the other ones are ones. And then the other part is thinking ahead. It's something that I'm required to do in my job is what are my bosses going to want me to do that I could already start? And so I know they're going to ask for it anyways. If I'm a step ahead when they ask for it, it makes me look good. And so agency partners that are ahead of that and so or can operate quickly. So one of my favorite examples was am I allowed to name call
name
and
it.
say, okay, Weber Shandwick's Dallas office was, oh my God, my best friends ever.
Really?
Like-
That's so good to hear.
They were amazing.
Yeah.
And I loved that I could type just their initials in Outlook and it would populate their email address. So I knew AG and AC was all I had to type and my day would be fixed. Like it was that
Aw.
nice.
That's a pretty cool shout out.
And are y'all connected?
To Weber,
Yeah.
we've worked with him in the past.
Okay, good.
At other agencies. Yeah, no. And I think most agencies have,
Yeah.
stellar
some sort
teams.
of connection.
Yeah.
But so we came out of a meeting. This was at Radio Shack, and it was right before Valentine's Day. It's like a month or two before, and we were like,
Yeah.
"What are we gonna do?" And I said, we had this little robot kit that you could make with like a Coke can, and it put arms and whatever. And I said, wouldn't it be cool if we had like this robot acting out various love scenes, family-friendly love scenes, in movies? That was literally like the statement. And it was like in passing in the hallway after a meeting. The next day, by I don't know, it was probably after lunch, I had and I didn't even ask for him. Like, we were just talking, and I was like, wouldn't that be cool? And then we went our way. And then the next day, they had put together like 5 different ideas of like movie scenes that we could recreate. And with this little tin can thing, like a video, and they're like, we could do this as a video, and then we can share that video all over and get people to buy the kit and make their own videos.
Yeah.
And that was like the next day. We ended up executing it. It was one of my favorite videos of all time. The hashtag was Robot Love, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And we reenacted scenes from Love Actually. We did, what were the other ones? There was, I don't remember all of them. I mean, it was 5 or 6 years ago. But it may have been The Notebook. It was, but the best one was we had him doing like the holding like the boombox above his head.
Oh, Say Anything.
And then Say Anything. And then we did the where she opens the door and he's got like the cards from Love Actually. Like, we had like 5 or 6 little like scenes. And so we spent a whole day shooting this. And the whole thing came out of like a side meeting where they just happened to be attentive. But
they listened to you.
Listened to me. And I didn't, and whether or not we had done the ideas, they didn't spend like all day and then send me a big fat bill and say, well, we thought about this for 9 hours yesterday. And it was just a Word doc. Like I didn't need a whole deck, with storyboards and all that. It was like a Word doc with like 5 paragraphs of like, here's what we could do if you wanted to do this. Yeah. And that's like my standard now. Yeah. Is like, if you can like take an idea that you can recognize as exciting, that paired with the intangibles of, yes, I heard you. You don't have to stress about this because I've got it. Yeah. Those together makes anything better.
That's awesome. Because it speaks to, Weber's a huge firm, and I worked with them as, IAT partners when I was at Edelman, and they had Unilever, and we had parts of Unilever, and they had other parts, like the general market part, and we had multicultural. So it's, as a big firm, you hear a lot of, and having been with big firms, you hear a lot of client horror stories where people get too big and bloated and believe their own hype, but to hear that that's a huge call out for a big agency to be very attentive is awesome. Yeah, because it means that there's something there that's retained itself.
Yeah, it was a great team, and they were. What was also cool, trying to put myself in the agency side, is we worked so closely together that I kind of saw most of them as coworkers as opposed to anything. And so I could recognize when I was about to be a terrible client. And I have friends that work at agencies, so they would tell me like, here's my client horror stories. Yeah. And there's some situations on the client side where like, I know I'm about to be a horrible client, but it's coming from somewhere else. And
it's not me.
I just have to do it, and it sucks, but here it is. Yeah. And I try to at least like preface those and like
empathize.
Look, I realize this is a terrible client ask, and you guys are going to talk about it for happy hours to come. But
I'll fund one happy hour.
Here it is. Yeah. And then, but there's other things where I'm like, okay, how could I make this less clienty? And I wouldn't normally think about that if they weren't such a great partner. But it makes me think about like, how are they going to end up dealing with this, and what can I make that not suck as much? You know what I mean?
We need that on a client T-shirt that we just give away. What can I make not suck as much? Because we're in a service industry, and we always say just serve, like just figure it out. We say yes a lot, but we figure it out and we get it done. But to know, and I think we get it done, especially for clients that we've had for years, and clients that literally put us in business, Kimberumanya. How do you show up, and how do you be a part of their team? And it is just kind of empathizing with their workload. What can I take off your plate? What are you stressing about? And it's mutual. But you don't hear it from clients a lot, so it's really nice to hear you say it.
Yeah, well, good.
Yeah, thanks. Caveat, I guess, disclaimer, Ricky is one of our clients. Any other thing you would want to share in terms of what makes like a social program successful, whether it's the team dynamic, the willingness to try new things, to fail?
My best advice, and I've given this on previous podcasts, is to build, and I'm a big process guy. Like the first thing I do when I come in is like, how is stuff getting done, and where are the broken pieces? And you guys have caught the brunt of that a few times and helped in certain places where I come in. I'm like, I don't care how the previous person did it. This is broken. We have to do it differently. And you guys have been great at flexing with that. Sometimes my processes even change. It's like the way that I think it should be done when I first join a company is not usually the same way that it should be done 6 months later, or even 3 months in some cases. But building to scale. So like right now, and I've been in teams where it's like, it's just me, but certainly everybody wants to grow in their career. And so especially as a social person, you're going to fight super, super hard to ever get any assistance, whether that's an agency support, whether that's an in-house, another head or whatever. That's a hard fight. And I've lost that fight numerous times. But the places where I've won that fight have been where I built the process out. Even though I didn't need it at the time, I built it so that it could scale. And so then when I come into that, I can say, look, if we had this other person or if we had this extra support, here's how we would use them. And here's how it makes our process so much smoother. Whereas if you're doing it, and so things like documentation is a big deal for me. If everything's just in my head, then one, I can never get anybody to help me because it's going to take me twice as long to teach them how to do it as it would for me to just do it. So vacations become hard, PTO is a challenge, all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you can document it and say, here's everything that you need in this one folder has every document you need to do my entire job. A lot of people get scared to do that because they're like, well, then what do they need me for?
Yeah.
So, because you still have to do it. But it makes it so much easier for somebody else to come in. You get them up to speed faster. They're more productive faster. And senior leadership often takes notice of that. It's like, wow, the people that join Ricky's team are like basically have been here for 10 years by the time they're 3 months in. Whereas people on this other team who didn't have any documentation and who came into, no training or anything like that or planning, a year later, they're still kind of floundering around a little bit. And so my biggest advice to any social person is, even if you don't need it now, everything that you do, build it so that it scales easily. Yeah. And that way, when you do get that one little bitty window, little window in the basement where somebody says, well, maybe we could talk about some extra resources, boom, you bust that window wide open and you're like, great, here's how I'm going to use it. It's going to do this, this, this. And you've got all that planned out. And then when they give you that resource, they can immediately see that return. It's so much more productive. The ramp-up time. Yeah, the ramp-up time is so much shorter, and they can see that it's more valuable. And so planning on just assume you're going to scale at some point. Yeah. And so set it up now, because otherwise you also get in a situation where if somehow you land in a magical job where they just heap resources on you, now you have to redo all your processes again to make do with all those resources. Whereas if you just plan to have them to begin with, then you don't have to so plan to scale at all stages is like my biggest, you'll get further advice.
That's kind of awesome to hear. We just created, and I take direction from the team a lot because I feel like the only thing I'm good at is building a good team. And if I take care of them, they'll take care of the business. And recently, my sister, who's a partner in the business, went to a conference and it was all about scaling and really kind of like learn, do, teach. And so if you build out modules or systems in place, then you can ramp up faster and grow in a way that isn't necessarily so hard or heavy. And so we're completing modules, which I think is really funny because we're not a huge tank. I've been at tanks where they have modules. We're a small, mighty force, but the team has just put everything, their daily to-dos in a module, in a video module. So it's like a narrated video, which I think is kind of, I think it's kind of awesome for our size, but that was to the point of we need to teach people how to do the things that we do fast so that we can get to bigger problems and better opportunities.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it takes the guesswork out. And then, like I said, it makes it from an HR standpoint a lot easier for somebody to take out for a day. Yeah. And you're not going to have to text them and figure out how to do something or whatever. You can hand the keys over real easily, take the keys back. And if you're just, even as a team of one, you still have to have somebody
that knows your stuff
that can cover for you, or else your vacations are going to suck or you're never going to take them, which is a huge problem in America. We never take vacations.
I know, America.
And so it's ridiculous.
I know. Such hard work. You see that Samsung commercial, which was awesome. They came out just a little bit before the Super Bowl with the guy from yeah. Oh, yeah. And it was like, America, how hard we work. And then at the end, he's like, I love this country. And it's like, it's kind of a double-edged sword. All this progress and innovation and freedoms come with no vacation.
More work.
Yeah. More work because we got to be great. This has been super delightful, Ricky. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. I know you have a lot to do at South by, but we just wanted to sit and chat with people who were doing and being successful. So from a creative perspective, from a social perspective, we obviously value your work and input, and we just want more people to know about it. So
cool. Well, it's been fun to be here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much for listening to us at APC Chats. Hopefully you walk away with some additional perspective or insight that you didn't have before. That said, if you want to continue the conversation, please do so following us at APC Collective on Twitter, Instagram,